Here's a brief video on the structure and tips for IB Economics Paper 1. So, here is the duration of the paper, 1 hour 30 minutes for standard level and higher level. Section A, you'll have 2 questions on microeconomics, and Section B, 2 questions on macroeconomics. Each question will have a Part A, Part B. Part A 10 marks and Part B 15 marks. The assessment objectives in Paper 1. In Part A, 1, 2 and 4, that's your knowledge, analysis, application. And in Part B, it's the same, but you have to show evaluation for the 15 marks. In total, the mark for the paper is 50, and for higher level, this counts for 30% of your IB. So some tips. You've got 45 minutes to answer question A and B. So the advice would be for the 10 marks, it should take no more than 15 minutes. And then your 15 marks should take no longer than 30 minutes. So 45 minutes for your micro and 45 minutes for your macro. Further tips: to save time, don't draw the same diagram twice. So if you've drawn a diagram in section or in question A, you can refer to it in question B. Also, don't define keywords twice. If you've defined inflation or consumer surplus in Part A, don't define it in Part B. To structure the question, for your 10 marker, trying to get those knowledge, analysis and application skills, the structure would be define key terms, insert a diagram. Now generally 80-90% of the time there's a diagram required, but not all the time, so have a look at the question. A nice well-labelled diagram, then explaining the diagram with all your economic theory. That's going to get your analysis and your application marks. Here this section should be quite lengthy. You've got connectives like because, this means, that's you're going into depth on your answer. And then 1 or 2 examples in the real world. That will get you some further application. Now the 15 marker is the same structure, those 4 stages, but you add in this evaluation section. So this might be a page at the end of your answer where you give the converse opinion. However, what does it depend on? What problems are there with your theory or with your analysis? Give 1 or 2 problems, maybe give 1 or 2 depends on. If it's micro, it'll usually depend on elasticity of demand. It might depend on, well, in the short run this will happen, in the long run this will happen. And you may want to have a short conclusion saying, well, overall I think this is a good option for the government, or your opinion. The examiner wants to see what's your opinion on things, okay? So let's have a look at some examples. Here's a past paper question. Looking at the front there, you're not permitted a calculator. Answer 1 question on A and 1 question on B. Use fully labelled diagrams and references to examples where appropriate. So very, very important you label everything. Just have a look at the questions on this particular paper. There's your choice of 2 microeconomic questions. Chapter 4 there, indirect tax. Explain why the government would do that. Nice diagram there. And then your evaluation part B. What are the consequences of this tax on the different stakeholders? So you'll talk about consumers, producers, society, government, all those things. The other choice, you'll have a nice diagram here on monopolistic competition, normal profit in the long run. Explain why that happens. And then you evaluate for your 15 marks that it's more efficient. So you'll say, however, it is more efficient on these things and it's possibly not more efficient on other things. So that's your micro side, which I'll focus on. Just be aware you'll have 2 choices, or a choice of 2 questions on the macro side, but I'm not going to spend time looking at those. You'll choose one of those questions. Looking at the mark scheme then for this, just checking it. So here we go. Explain why government might decide to impose indirect taxes. Answers may include, but not everything it'll include. You define obviously indirect taxes, explain the theory. You've got a diagram, and then some examples, just like the plan. and the assessment criteria, which is very important. So if you want to get those top marks, 9 out of 10, clear understanding of the specific demands of the question, relevant terms clearly defined, relevant economic theory well explained and applied to your diagram. Diagram is appropriate and applied effectively, and you've got some examples. Okay, so that's what the examiner is looking for in those 10 mark questions. On your 15 marks, it's going to be the same. You define, you've got your diagram, you just have to have this last part, this evaluation. So what does evaluation include? Well, that's your advantages and your disadvantages. You may want to talk about different stakeholders, who's more important, and your opinions are very important. So at the end of your evaluation, the examiner wants to know, what do you think, which is the best in your opinion. So hopefully that's been helpful. Have a look at some past papers. Thank you.